The moment I saw barbecue sauce smeared across my daughter's medal in my mother-in-law's trash can, I thought the worst part was over, until my daughter whispered, "Do people hate girls who win a lot?" And my husband decided his family would never step foot in our lake house again. Chapter 1. The Medals in the Trash. By the time we crossed into Cedar Glen, the streets already looked like every Memorial Day postcard people pretend still exists in America. Flags zip-tied to mailboxes, kids running through sprinklers in oversized t-shirts, folding chairs unfolding in driveways before noon, somebody grilling too early, somebody drinking too early. My mother-in-law Lorraine loved holidays because they let her pretend our family was normal. I was halfway through unwrapping a tray of deviled eggs in my lap when I noticed Ivy clutching the navy pouch against her stomach again. She had been holding it the entire drive. "Only 3, she said softly from the back seat. "You think 3 is okay?" I turned around. Her knees were pulled together, seatbelt tight across her chest, fingers wrapped around the pouch like someone might take it away from her if she relaxed. 3 medals from track season. 1 silver relay medal from county, 1 bronze from regionals, 1 invitational ribbon she'd almost refused to keep. I hate that I already knew what she meant. Not too many medals, not too heavy, not too flashy, too visible. I swallowed before answering. "Honey, you earned them." She nodded, but not like she believed me. Last winter, I found an A+ math exam shoved underneath towels in the linen closet because she didn't want people thinking she was obsessed with grades. 2 months before that, she asked me not to hang one of her track ribbons in the mudroom because, in her exact words, it made her feel braggy. She was 13 years old and already apologizing for succeeding in public. Owen glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You worked hard for those," he said simply. That was one thing about my husband. He never over-talked emotions. He just planted something steady in the room and let you decide whether to stand on it. Lorraine's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac lined with perfectly trimmed lawns and hydrangea bushes that somehow never died, no matter how bad Wisconsin winters got. By the time we pulled into the driveway, Richard was already outside in sandals and cargo shorts, flipping burgers like he was running a military operation. There were coolers near the garage, red, white, and blue paper plates stacked on folding tables, country music floating through outdoor speakers. And immediately, before I'd even gotten out of the SUV, Vanessa appeared. "There she is," she called toward Ivy with a smile too bright to trust. "My favorite athlete." Vanessa Holloway could weaponize friendliness better than anyone I'd ever met. She hugged me quickly, kissed the air beside my cheek, complimented my earrings, told Owen he looked tired, all within 30 seconds. Then her eyes landed on the navy pouch. Something in her face shifted, tiny, fast, but I saw it. Lorraine had set up one of her ridiculous achievement tables near the kitchen island again. Every grandchild was supposed to place something there each Memorial Day. Photos, awards, sports trophies, school certificates. A normal person would have called it cute. In Lorraine's hands, it always felt more like ranking livestock at a county fair. Carter was already inside placing a framed baseball photo near the center. He was 14 now, tall, quiet, permanently uncomfortable in his own shoulders. Ivy carefully laid her medals beside the photo. Vanessa laughed softly behind us. Well, somebody had a successful season. Lorraine smiled while arranging a bowl of potato salad. Confidence is good. Humility matters too. Denise Callahan glanced at me from across the kitchen. It lasted less than a second, but it felt like she just silently confirmed something I'd been trying not to admit for years. Outside, Richard immediately pulled Owen toward the patio. "Hey, before you relax, can you look at the dock permit issue at Silver Pines this week?" Another cousin walked over holding a beer. "Lake house opening next weekend or what?" Owen gave the same vague half answer he always gave when people assumed access to Silver Pines belonged to the entire Mercer bloodline. "We'll see." At the time, I still hadn't fully realized my husband's family had spent years treating him like a utility company that happened to share their last name. I carried the deviled eggs into the kitchen while Lorraine started directing people around like she was producing live television. More lemonade in the fridge, Camille. Can you move those buns? Where's Vanessa? I grabbed a pitcher and bent to pull out ice from the freezer, and then I noticed something strange. Silence. Not total silence, just the kind where a room suddenly stops breathing. When I turned around, Ivy was standing beside the trash can, still, frozen. A strip of blue ribbon hung over the edge between barbecue-stained paper plates and crumpled napkins. For a second, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Then Ivy reached down with shaking fingers and pulled the navy pouch from the garbage. One metal came out smeared with orange sauce. I stared at Vanessa. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Carter already feels invisible enough," she said. Ivy blinked hard. "I didn't even talk about them." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You didn't have to." Lorraine walked into the kitchen at exactly the wrong moment, or maybe exactly the expected one. I waited for her to say Vanessa had crossed a line. Instead, she sighed like we were all exhausting her. Ivy is strong enough to survive a little embarrassment. I actually felt my stomach drop. Then Lorraine said the thing I don't think she meant to say out loud. Vanessa needs this family more than Ivy needs another medal. The room went completely still. Even Vanessa looked startled for half a second. Ivy lowered her eyes immediately, like shame was the natural response, like she understood her role in the system without anyone needing to explain it. "I shouldn't have brought them," she whispered. That sentence hit me harder than the trash can. Not anger, not crying. Apology. My daughter's first instinct was to believe she had caused this. Owen walked in carrying a tray of burger buns. He stopped the second he saw Ivy holding the stained metal. His eyes moved slowly to Vanessa. "Did you throw my daughter's medals in the trash?" His voice stayed perfectly calm, which somehow made it worse. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "You're making this dramatic." "Not during a holiday," Lorraine snapped immediately. Owen looked at both of them for a long second. Then he turned toward me. "Camille, get Ivy." That was it. No yelling, no speech, no family showdown. He just made a decision. I took the pouch from Ivy carefully and zipped it shut while she stared at the floor. Outside, I could feel people pretending not to notice us leaving. Richard called something after Owen about burgers. Nobody answered him. The drive home felt unbearably quiet. About 10 minutes in, Ivy finally spoke from the back seat. "Do people hate girls who win a lot?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Owen kept both hands on the steering wheel, eyes forward. Then he picked up his phone and called Trevor Pike. Trevor answered almost immediately. Owen's voice stayed flat. "Change every code at Silver Pines tonight." A pause. "Gate 2. Then he hung up, and for the first time since I married into that family, I realized my husband was done pretending generosity and humiliation were the same thing. Chapter 2. The House Everyone Used. Silver Pines sat about 40 minutes from us near Lake Geneva, tucked behind a row of pine trees thick enough to block the road from view. When Owen bought it in late 2021 through Mercer Property Holdings, LLC, he told me he wanted one place in life that felt quiet. Not impressive, not performative, quiet. That lasted maybe 6 months before his family turned it into community property in their heads. By the time we got home from Lorraine's that night, Trevor had already texted Owen confirmation screenshots. Gate code changed, marina keypad updated, guest access removed, temporary summer reservations canceled. Owen read every message without expression, while Ivy disappeared upstairs with the navy pouch pressed against her chest again. I watched him loosen his watch and set his phone on the counter. "You already knew what you were going to do," I said quietly. He leaned both palms against the kitchen island. I knew the second she apologized. I didn't ask which she he meant, maybe because I already knew too. I went upstairs a few minutes later and found Ivy sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor beside her bed. The medals were spread carefully on a towel. One still had orange barbecue sauce dried near the ribbon clasp. She was scrubbing it gently with a wet washcloth, like she was afraid to damage it further. My chest hurt looking at her. "Honey, let me help." "I got it." She kept rubbing the metal. Slowly, carefully, too carefully for a 13-year-old. Then she looked up at me. "Do you think Carter thinks I hate him now?" The question caught me so off guard I almost laughed from disbelief. Not because it was funny, because it was devastating. "You're worried about him?" She shrugged immediately. "I just don't want him feeling worse." There it was again, that instinct to make herself smaller so everyone else could stay comfortable. I sat beside her on the carpet. "Sweetheart, none of this was your fault." She nodded politely without believing me. Then she dried the metal and quietly placed all three back inside the pouch. But instead of setting them on her dresser, she opened her closet door and slid the pouch behind a stack of sweatshirts. "Why are you putting them away?" She hesitated. "I don't know." I waited. Finally, she said it. "I don't want people thinking I'm obsessed with myself." I stared at the closet door after she shut it. My daughter had won medals she trained months for, and somehow she still felt embarrassed for being seen. Downstairs, I could hear Owen's phone vibrating nonstop. By 10 that night, the family group chat looked like a courtroom where nobody wanted to be the first person to admit what had actually happened. Owen finally typed one message. Vanessa admitted she threw Ivy's track medals into the trash. Lorraine defended it. Access to Silver Pines is revoked indefinitely. Then silence. Not real silence, digital silence, the kind where everybody's typing bubble appears and disappears because they're trying to figure out which version of morality costs them the least personally. Denise Callahan answered first. She threw away a child's medals? A minute later, Jonah Mercer wrote, "Wait, what?" Then Vanessa finally jumped in. "You're leaving out context." Owen responded almost immediately, "What context changes the trash can?" Nothing after that moved the way Vanessa wanted it to, because there wasn't a softer version of what she'd done. There wasn't a magical explanation for barbecue sauce on a 13-year-old girl's medal. But that didn't stop people from trying. Richard texted privately first. "Son, everybody was emotional today." Then Lorraine, "Closing the house over a misunderstanding is cruel." Then a cousin from Milwaukee chimed in with, "What Vanessa did was wrong, but maybe this is a little extreme." I watched Owen screenshot every message, save every voicemail, forward every email into a separate folder. At one point, he even started printing invoices from the downstairs office printer. Dock repairs, insurance renewals, propane delivery, cleaning service bills, pest control, landscaping, page after page after page. I leaned against the doorway watching him. "Since when do you keep records on your own family?" He didn't look up. "Since they started rewriting everything." The printer continued spitting paper into the tray. I suddenly remembered every summer weekend from the last 4 years differently. Vanessa bringing real estate clients to Silver Pines without asking because the lake view made her look successful. Lorraine inviting church friends for 4th of July cookouts and announcing it after the fact, like Owen worked for hospitality services. Richard handing dock access codes to fishing buddies because they'd known him 30 years. And every single Sunday night, Owen staying behind after everyone left, cleaning beer bottles, rolling up dock cushions, repairing things people broke, paying invoices nobody else even saw. Not once in 4 years had anyone asked whether he still wanted to do it. The next morning, Trevor called to confirm all June reservations had officially been removed from the system, including Carter's birthday weekend. That was apparently the detail that finally made Vanessa understand Owen wasn't bluffing. Her call came less than 20 minutes later. I could hear her voice through Owen's phone from across the kitchen. you canceled Carter's birthday. Owen stayed calm. No, you did that yesterday. Vanessa started crying halfway through the conversation, but even then it sounded more angry than hurt. He ended the call after less than 3 minutes. No yelling, no threats, just finality. By lunchtime, Lorraine was calling me instead. I answered because some part of me still hadn't fully accepted we'd. He didn't look up. Since they started rewriting everything. The printer continued spitting paper into the tray. I suddenly remembered every summer weekend from the last 4 years differently. Vanessa bringing real estate clients to Silver Pines without asking because the lake view made her look successful. Lorraine inviting church friends for 4th of July cookouts and announcing it after the fact, like Owen worked for hospitality services. Richard handing dock access codes to fishing buddies because they'd known him 30 years. And every single Sunday night, Owen staying behind after everyone left, cleaning beer bottles, rolling up dock cushions, repairing things people broke, paying invoices nobody else even saw. Not once in 4 years had anyone asked whether he still wanted to do it. The next morning, Trevor called to confirm all June reservations had officially been removed from the system, including Carter's birthday weekend. That was apparently the detail that finally made Vanessa understand Owen wasn't bluffing. Her call came less than 20 minutes later. I could hear her voice through Owen's phone from across the kitchen. You canceled Carter's birthday. Owen stayed calm. No, you did that yesterday. Vanessa started crying halfway through the conversation, but even then it sounded more angry than hurt. He ended the call after less than 3 minutes. No yelling, no threats, just finality. By lunchtime, Lorraine was calling me instead. I answered because some part of me still hadn't fully accepted we'd crossed into something permanent. Camille, she started immediately, your husband is destroying this family over a child misunderstanding social cues. I almost laughed. A child misunderstanding social cues, as if Ivy had somehow accidentally thrown herself into the trash can. Lorraine continued before I could speak. Vanessa already feels terrible. No, she doesn't. A pause. Then Lorraine switched tactics. Silver Pines was never supposed to be used this way. Used what way? As leverage. I looked out the kitchen window toward our backyard while she spoke. I could see Ivy sitting on the patio steps alone with headphones around her neck, staring at nothing. For years, I had confused Lorraine's version of peace with maturity. Now I realized peace in that family usually meant whoever got hurt was expected to absorb it quietly. You're letting Owen tear everyone apart, Lorraine said softly. I closed my eyes. No, I think everybody just noticed he was the one holding it together. Silence. Not offended silence. Realizing silence. Like maybe part of her knew I was right. Upstairs, the printer started again. Another stack of invoices. Insurance renewals, dock maintenance, septic servicing. Evidence of one man carrying an entire family tradition financially while everyone else called it bonding. Lorraine's voice hardened again. Families forgive things. I watched Ivy through the window. My daughter still looked smaller than she had 24 hours earlier. Maybe, I said quietly, but healthy families usually apologize first. She hung up on me. I stood there holding the phone for a long moment before turning around. And that was when I realized Ivy had come inside during the call. She was standing near the hallway entrance barefoot in oversized sweatpants, looking at me carefully. Grandma thinks this is my fault too. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out fast enough, because the worst part was that Ivy didn't sound shocked anymore. She sounded like she was trying to confirm a pattern she already suspected existed. And for the first time in her life, I saw my daughter wondering whether being good at something was worth what people made her pay for it. Chapter 3. The people who needed her smaller. The house felt quieter after that, but not peaceful. It felt like the kind of silence that settles in after somebody finally says the thing everyone else spent years arranging furniture around. Summer in Wisconsin always arrived slowly. The trees turned green first. Then came the humidity. Then everybody suddenly remembered they owned patio furniture and unresolved family issues. By the middle of June, our family group chat had split into invisible sides. Nobody announced it out loud, but you could feel it in who reacted to what. Denise still answered directly. Jonah mostly stayed neutral. A few cousins stopped saying anything at all, because silence was easier than choosing morality and access to a lake house. Lorraine, meanwhile, had moved into her next strategy: religion, family unity, forgiveness. She started posting Bible verses in the group chat without context, little passive-aggressive reminders disguised as devotion. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Blessed are the peacemakers. Family is God's first ministry. Owen muted the conversation after the third verse. One afternoon, Pastor Neil Abbott called him directly while we were eating takeout Chinese food at the kitchen island. I knew immediately it was bad, because Owen almost never put his phone face down during dinner. He listened for maybe 30 seconds before speaking. "No, Pastor, I understand forgiveness." Pause. "No, I don't think humiliating a 13-year-old qualifies as a misunderstanding." Ivy stopped eating beside me. Owen glanced at Ivy before continuing. My daughter deserved dignity first. Then he hung up. No speech afterward, no rant, just silence. That was another thing people misunderstood about Owen. They thought calm meant flexible. It didn't. Calm just meant he didn't need theatrics to stay firm. Over the next week, little memories started coming back to me in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. Not dramatic moments, small ones, the dangerous kind. I remembered Ivy winning a regional science award in 7th grade and asking if we could leave the certificate in the car before Lorraine's Christmas dinner. I remembered finding a track ribbon shoved inside her backpack pocket because she didn't want to walk into family brunch holding it. I remembered one specific conversation from last spring, after regionals. Can we maybe not tell Grandma about this one? At the time, I thought she was being shy. Now I realized she'd been managing the emotional temperature of grown adults before she was old enough to drive. One afternoon, I was putting laundry away when I found an old ribbon buried in the back corner of Ivy's closet, underneath hoodies and soccer socks. The ribbon itself was faded blue, 2nd place, middle school invitational. I almost tossed it into the keepsake bin before I noticed handwriting on the back in black marker. "Don't bring this around Aunt Vanessa." I sat there on the carpet staring at the words for so long the dryer buzzer downstairs went off twice. Then I started crying quietly into one of Owen's folded sweatshirts, because suddenly every strange little moment from the last few years rearranged itself into something uglier. My daughter had been making herself smaller for a long time, and none of us had realized how hard she was working at it. Not because she was insecure, because she was adapting. I was still sitting on the laundry room floor later that evening when my phone buzzed with a text notification, not from Lorraine, from Carter. Actually, it was meant for Ivy, but she'd left her phone charging downstairs. I shouldn't have read it. I did anyway. I never asked her to do that. A second message appeared. My mom always compares everybody. Then another. I hate when they talk about sports at family stuff. I stared at the screen for a long moment before carrying the phone upstairs to Ivy. She was lying on her bed pretending to watch TikTok while obviously rereading the same comment section over and over. I handed her the phone. "Carter texted you." She looked nervous immediately. "Is he mad?" "No." She read the messages slowly. Then, softer than I expected, she said, "I know he didn't ask for it." And that somehow made me even sadder, because Ivy was still protecting him emotionally while carrying the humiliation herself. A few days later, I got a call from Denver from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said my name carefully. "This is Ava." I sat down immediately. Ava Holloway was Vanessa's older daughter from her first marriage, 22 years old, living in Denver, minimal contact with her mother for almost 2 years. We'd barely spoken since she moved away. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Ava sighed. "She's been like this forever." I leaned back against the kitchen counter. "What do you mean?" Another silence. Then Ava said the sentence that finally made Vanessa make sense to me. "She can't stand another woman or girl being admired in front of her." The wording hit me hard because it was too specific to be impulsive, too practiced. Ava continued, "When I got into CU Boulder, she told people I only got accepted because admission standards were lower after COVID." I closed my eyes. "When Carter started baseball, she acted like every game was a scholarship interview." Ava laughed once without humor. "If somebody else's kid got attention, she acted like something was being stolen from her." That night, I told Owen about the call while he sat at the dining room table reviewing insurance documents from Silver Pines. He nodded slowly, like none of it surprised him anymore. Then he forwarded another email to Melanie Pike, the attorney helping him clean up the liability mess around the property. Apparently, Richard had been giving old marina keypad codes to fishing friends for years. Melanie's response came back fast. "If anyone gets injured on that dock without documented authorization, you are personally liable." Owen immediately drafted a formal notice. "No unauthorized access, no guest privileges, dock insurance violations under review. Everything documented, everything timestamped. Procedural, clean, final." The more paperwork involved, the calmer he became. A few days later, the social fallout finally started becoming visible outside the family. I was at Cedar Glen Athletic Boosters helping set up fundraiser tables when Monica Hale approached Vanessa near the concession stand. Monica kept her voice polite, but not quiet enough. "So, what actually happened at the lake house?" Vanessa smiled too quickly. "It was blown way out of proportion." Monica nodded awkwardly. "Right, I just heard something about medals." Vanessa's face tightened for half a second. Tiny, but noticeable. Suburban humiliation almost never looks dramatic. It looks like women suddenly deciding not to stand next to you at booster meetings. That same evening, Lorraine showed up at our house unannounced. I opened the door and immediately knew she'd rehearsed the entire conversation in the car. Her eyes were wet already. "You're teaching Ivy to hold grudges." I crossed my arms. "No, I'm teaching her she doesn't need to stay where she's humiliated." Lorraine looked genuinely offended by that. "You're turning this family against itself." I almost laughed. The family had already chosen itself over a 13-year-old. We were just refusing to help them hide it anymore. Lorraine stepped closer. "Vanessa already struggles enough. Ivy will be fine." There it was, the full truth. Not fairness, priority. Protect the fragile adult. The child can absorb the damage. Something inside me went cold. "You keep saying she'll be fine," I said quietly. "Do you know what she asked me in the car after your house?" Lorraine looked away immediately. That told me enough. She knew. Maybe not the exact words, but she knew what they'd done. She left 10 minutes later without apologizing once. After the door shut, Owen walked into the hallway holding the old ribbon I'd found in Ivy's closet earlier that week. He turned it over silently and read the writing on the back again. Then he looked at me.
They trained her to apologize for succeeding, and neither of us could pretend we hadn't seen it anymore.
Chapter 4. When Access Disappeared. By the first official week of summer break, Silver Pines had stopped being a family tradition and started being a locked building near Lake Geneva with fresh keypad codes nobody else knew. That was when the panic became practical, not emotional, not spiritual, practical. People can survive being angry at each other for years. What they cannot survive as gracefully is losing something they assumed would always be available. Trevor Pike sent Owen the final access report on a Tuesday morning. The dock access had been revoked. The marina keypad had been updated. The smart locks were active. The cleaning crew had been removed from all family-requested weekends. Every summer reservation that had been placed through Owen's owner portal was gone. I was making coffee when Owen read the list. He didn't smile. That mattered to me. This wasn't entertainment to him. It was a boundary. Still, the effect was immediate. By noon, Jonah Mercer called. I could hear his voice through Owen's phone while I folded towels at the kitchen counter. "Look, what Vanessa did was awful." Owen said nothing. "But maybe this went too far." Owen looked out toward the backyard where Ivy sat at the patio table with her summer reading book open and untouched. Too far was the trash can. Jonah exhaled. "I get that. I just mean Carter's birthday is Saturday. Then Carter deserves a birthday that isn't built on humiliating my daughter." Jonah didn't answer. That was the problem with people who wanted both sides. Eventually, someone made them name what they were protecting. Carter's party moved to a public park pavilion near Cedar Glen Elementary, the kind with splintered picnic tables and a sign telling everyone not to tape decorations to city property. Vanessa posted photos anyway. Red balloons, grocery store cake, Carter looking like he wanted to disappear into his own hoodie. One of the younger cousins commented under the pictures, "What happened to Silver Pines?" Vanessa didn't answer, but I heard from Denise that she smiled through the whole party like her teeth hurt. That same week, the social shift at Cedar Glen Athletics became harder to ignore. Monica Hale quietly removed Vanessa from the Booster Fundraiser Committee. No public announcement, just a revised volunteer list that suddenly had Vanessa's name missing from the section she'd chaired for 2 years. Vanessa noticed. Of course she noticed. Women like Vanessa lived by lists they could point to. At the next track meet, I saw her near the concession stand trying to laugh with 2 other sports moms. One of them glanced toward Ivy, then lowered her voice. "I heard something about medals." Vanessa's smile twitched. People exaggerate everything. The women nodded politely, then drifted away before the next event started. Suburban punishment doesn't usually arrive with shouting. It arrives as empty seats beside you at booster meetings. I wish I could say Ivy healed as quickly as the consequences started landing. She didn't. She skipped 2 summer races she'd been excited about in April. She said her ankle felt weird, then that she was tired, then that it wasn't a big deal. I knew what not a big deal sounded like now. At practice one evening, Coach Elena Ruiz stood beside her at the edge of the track, while younger kids ran warm-ups. I watched from the bleachers, pretending not to listen. Coach Ruiz had a calm way about her, no forced cheerfulness, no dramatic speeches, just steadiness. "You don't have to race this weekend," she told Ivy. Ivy nodded too fast. "But don't confuse resting with hiding." Ivy looked down at her spikes. Coach Ruiz continued, "You don't have to disappear because adults acted badly." Ivy didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. That felt like something. The first real smile came a week later. It was a Wednesday evening meet, humid and buggy, with parents fanning themselves using folded programs. Ivy had agreed only to help time sprints, not compete. Near the end, Carter appeared by the fence. He was alone. No Vanessa, no Lorraine. He didn't approach us. He just stood there awkwardly until Ivy noticed him. Then he placed a roll of athletic tape on the bench near her bag and left a folded note under it. Ivy waited until he walked away before opening it. I watched her read the note. Then she smiled. Not polite, not careful, real. Later, she let me see it. You shouldn't quit because adults are insecure. Carter's handwriting was messy and slanted, like he'd written it fast before he could change his mind. I didn't pretend the note fixed everything, but it told Ivy something none of the adults in Lorraine's kitchen had been willing to say. The cruelty was not hers to carry. Lorraine came over again that Friday. This time she didn't call first. When I opened the door, she was standing on our porch with a casserole dish wrapped in foil, as if carbohydrates could soften accountability. I brought dinner. We're fine. Her eyes moved past me into the hallway. That was when she saw the frame. Owen had hung it the night before. The stained metal, the ribbon still faintly discolored near the edge, preserved behind glass instead of hidden in Ivy's closet. Lorraine stared at it. For once, she had nothing ready. I let the silence sit. Then she said the line I knew was coming eventually. "You're tearing this family apart." I looked at the medal, then back at her. "No, I'm watching what happens when Owen stops financing it." Her face tightened. "That is unfair." "What part?" She opened her mouth, but I kept going, still quiet. The dock, the propane, the cleaning crew, the insurance, the birthdays, the reunions, the groceries, the extra guests Vanessa invited without asking, the church friends you brought in July, Richard's fishing buddies. Lorraine's grip on the casserole dish shifted. "You make it sound transactional." It became transactional when everyone accepted the benefits and ignored the disrespect. She looked at the framed medal again. Something moved across her face. Not apology, recognition maybe, but recognition without accountability is just discomfort. Richard called Owen that night. I sat beside him at the dining table while the phone lay between us on speaker. Owen's eyes stayed on the table. "You mean before it became inconvenient for everyone?" Richard didn't argue. That was almost worse. "I don't know what your mother wants from this anymore." Owen leaned back in his chair. "She wants access without apology." Silence. Then Richard said, very quietly, "Maybe." It was the closest he had come to honesty. After he hung up, Owen looked exhausted in a way I hadn't seen before. Not weak, just tired from finally setting down something he'd been carrying so long his body had mistaken it for part of him. A few days later, Lorraine came by one last time before July. She didn't bring food. She didn't cry. She stood in the hallway and looked at the framed medal again. For almost a full minute, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe she would say the simple thing. I was wrong. I hurt her. Vanessa hurt her. Instead, she turned toward the door. "I hope this was worth it." I didn't answer, because some people would rather lose a whole family than admit they helped wound a child, and by then, I was no longer willing to pay for their comfort with Ivy's silence.
Chapter 5. The Summer They Lost Control. By the following summer, Silver Pines was quiet in a way I had almost forgotten a house could be. No cars packed along the gravel drive, no coolers abandoned on the porch, no Lorraine arranging people into matching shirts for doc photos, no Richard asking Owen to check one more thing before relaxing, no Vanessa laughing too loudly while making sure everyone saw her standing in the best light. Just pine trees, water, morning fog, Ivy sneakers by the back door. Summer 2026 did not arrive like a victory parade. It arrived slowly, with fewer phone calls and more ordinary dinners, with weekends that belonged to us for the first time in years. I used to think keeping the peace was maturity. I thought being the bigger person meant absorbing the smaller cruelties and calling them family quirks. Then I watched my daughter learn to make herself smaller so grown adults could feel comfortable, and I finally understood that peace without protection is just silence wearing good manners. Ivy did not heal all at once. People like to tell stories as if one brave decision fixes everything, but real children do not work that way. For a while, she still hesitated before telling us good news. She still started sentences with only, as in only second place, only regional qualifying, only a relay split. Every time she did, Owen would look up from whatever he was doing and say the same thing. Try that again without only. At first, she rolled her eyes. Then she smiled. Then, eventually, she actually did. Coach Elena Ruiz helped more than she probably knew. That June, she asked Ivy to mentor a group of younger runners at summer track camp. Not as punishment, not as pressure, just because Ivy was patient, careful, and fast enough to teach without showing off. I watched from the bleachers one morning as a little girl with loose braids tried to keep up with Ivy during warm-ups. After the drill, the girls stopped, breathless and amazed. "You're really fast." I felt my whole body tense out of habit, waiting for Ivy to shrink the compliment, waiting for her to say, "Not really," waiting for her to look around and make sure nobody was uncomfortable. Instead, Ivy wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled. "Thanks, I practice a lot." That was it. No apology, no downplaying, just truth. I looked away before she could see me crying. The family changed too, but not in the dramatic way people expect from stories like this. Nobody went to jail, nobody lost a mansion, nobody was exposed on the evening news. They simply lost access to what they had mistaken for love. Silver Pines first lost Vanessa, then she lost the image that came with it, the lake weekends, the client brunches, the pictures on the dock, the casual way she could imply she belonged to something bigger than she owned. At Cedar Glen Athletics, she was still polite, still polished, but the circle around her had thinned. Monica Hale never put her back on the fundraiser committee. The other sports moms never said why. They didn't have to. Suburban women do not always confront you. Sometimes they just stop saving you a seat. Lorraine lost something quieter: control. She could no longer summon everyone to the lake and call it unity. She could no longer use Owen's patience as a family resource. She could no longer make her disappointment turn him into the son who carried chairs, paid invoices, and swallowed insults for the sake of the holiday. For months, she sent short texts. "Hope you're well," "Thinking of Ivy," "Family shouldn't stay divided forever." Owen answered some of them, politely, briefly, never with access codes. Carter changed in his own way. He stopped showing up in Vanessa's posts as often. By fall, Ava Holloway was visiting from Denver more, teaching him the distance she had learned the hard way. Carter and Ivy were not suddenly best friends, that would have been too neat, but sometimes he texted after meets. "Good race." That was it, and somehow that was enough. Denise Callahan never missed a chance to send Ivy 3 clapping emojis after every track update. No comparison, no lecture, just applause. Jonah took the longest. For months, he stayed in that uncomfortable middle place where people say they understand both sides because they do not want to lose access to either. Then in October, after Lorraine tried to organize a fall lake weekend through him, he called Owen and said the thing I had not expected. "You were right. If they want family, they can start with an apology." Owen sat very still after that call ended, not satisfied, just lighter. The medal in the hallway stayed where Owen had hung it, the stained one.
For a while, Ivy avoided looking at it. Then one day I caught her standing in front of the frame after school, backpack still on, reading the small card Owen had placed beneath it. "Nothing about you needed to be smaller." She did not say anything. Neither did I. Some things work better when nobody tries to turn them into a lesson. Late that summer, Ivy came home from an invitational meet with a new medal in her palm. Not county, not state, nothing that would mean much to anyone outside our kitchen. But she had run her best time. She set the medal on the counter beside the mail while Owen was unloading the dishwasher. Then she looked at him. "Can this one go on the wall too?" Owen turned so quickly he almost dropped a plate. I was standing by the sink, and for a second the room became completely still. Not because the question was big, because it was ordinary. Because my daughter had placed something she earned in the open and expected it to belong there. Owen picked up the medal carefully. "Yeah," he said, voice rougher than usual. "We can do that." That night he framed it beside the old one, the ruined medal with the faint orange stain, the new medal with the clean ribbon, side by side. Not to remember what Vanessa did, to remember what Ivy survived without letting it define her. A few weeks later, Lorraine came by for Owen's birthday, invited this time, briefly, carefully, with boundaries already explained. Vanessa was not invited. Not because we wanted punishment forever, but because apology without ownership is only strategy. Lorraine stood in the hallway looking at the frames again. Her eyes lingered on the stained metal, then on the new one. For once, she did not mention forgiveness. She did not mention family unity. She only said, very quietly, "She's getting tall." I looked at Ivy in the living room, laughing at something Carter had texted her about his mother trying to join pickleball. "She is," I said. It was not reconciliation. It was not closure wrapped in a bow. It was just a woman who once expected a child to absorb humiliation, standing in a house where that child's achievements were now displayed in plain sight. That was enough for that day. Some families only love you when you are easier to control than your own success. Some families call it humility when what they really mean is obedience. And some adults will protect their pride so fiercely they do not notice the child they are teaching to disappear. But my daughter will not grow up believing she has to make herself smaller to be kept. Not in this house. Not anymore. So tell me, if a grown woman humiliated your child just to protect her own pride and the rest of the family asked you to keep the peace, what would you do? Would you forgive for the sake of family, or would you close the door for the sake of your child? I would really like to hear what you think. And if stories like this matter to you, stay with this channel because there are more stories about quiet strength, family betrayal, and the kind of justice that does not scream but still changes everything.